move into the Super Bowl champions, the favorites to win the division. Again, they were one of the favorites to win the division last year and also one of the favorites to win the Super Bowl last year. It all came to fruition. They made some huge bets, really have gambled away draft picks, spent a lot of money. They, captured the crown last year, so it worked out. But really, again, as we opened up, at what cost? They certainly already lost some pieces this offseason, which we'll get into. Again, going into last year, had elevated expectations, 10.5 wins, went over, finished season 12-5, but didn't perform well from an ATS perspective, 8-9. Obviously we can see there was actually quite some volatility here. And I think it was this period here, losing versus Tennessee, losing versus the Niners, losing versus Green Bay, and 3 consecutive games. This is where I think Twitter especially started to really light up, really questioning the Rams' roster construction, franchise management. Oh man, they did all this to win the Super Bowl, and now they just lost 3 games in a row. They're barely even a top 10 team. What are they going to do now in the future? This season is lost. Oh man, Matthew Stafford, he's not performing up to expectation. And this was a bad one. This was ugly.
Titans was Sunday Night Football, and they were missing. That was, I think, the first.
Yeah, that was a big.
I don't think AJ Brown was even playing, and Stafford threw a couple bad picks. Everyone was watching. They had a bye in there also. Those 4 weeks kind of sit with you.
And then this one, -4, get slaughtered by 20 at home. This is when I tried to buy the bottom on the Rams. Man, I was so close. So close. If the Rams would have won this game and covered, I probably would have kept leaning into the Rams and made a shit ton of money. But then I'm like, fuck, I was wrong. They're going lower. And then they proceeded to rip into the end of the season. So bottomed there in that game against Green Bay. Super square on the road versus Green Bay as favorites. And I bet the Rams.
I think the y-axis here is actually relatively small, especially for the divisions you've seen, which is
5 spots.
Because they were supposed to be or thought to be a Super Bowl contender, it almost felt a lot worse than what was actually happening. They were never below a top 10 team at any point.
Yeah, so we can see, again, from a game-by-game breakdown, here's that nasty little dip from Stafford. Market loved the Rams all season. This is all green. We're a top 10 pick in the Super Contest 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. See, from a bet percentage, 80, 75% every single week. And again, 8-9. Super Bowl champions. So it just goes to show that just because we're one of the best teams in the league doesn't mean you're going to necessarily make money betting on them. Offseason changes. Again, brought in Bobby Wagner from Seattle, division rival, 31 years old. Maybe he's got a year or 2 left. Again, linebacker, starting to lose speed, agility, athleticism. Allen Robinson had probably his worst year last year. Was it more of a byproduct of playing on a miserable team? Or, again, is he kind of crossed the Rubicon and no longer what he was? And then try to shore up a little bit of the secondary. But, again, mostly losses. Again, lost 2 starters, Whitworth and Corbett on the offensive line. Lost Von Miller, lost a couple other folks on the defense, and lost 6 starters themselves.
I think those offensive line losses are big. They are playing with that short window, trying to get as much as they can out of it. Like we said, it worked out last year for them. They certainly could work it out again this year, but that's a tough task to ask any team to repeat.
Yeah, I'm with you there. In fact, again, a lot of the players that kind of came together and turned out to be Super Bowl heroes were all players that were not even here week 1. Odell Beckham, Von Miller, Eric Weddle, all those players were signed in the second half or traded for in the second half of the season and turned out to play meaningful roles on this team and push them over the edge. So maybe that's something that, again, that they do this year. Is they kind of tread water, kind of maybe go through a bad spurt there, but they have a sufficient amount of talent. They still have a great coaching staff. Although what I would actually add in the losses, and I kind of mentioned at the beginning as well, is the McVay staff. Lost 6 coaches. When you continue to have that brain drain, when does that start to affect conditioning, again, game planning, player happiness? Maybe they had a personal tie to a specific coach or whatnot. That's the type of stuff that we don't really see kind of behind the scenes, but these are still human beings who have new bosses. And that can always be, potentially disruptive. So as we go into 2022, again, win total a little bit less than what it was last year. So we're at 10. Model, our PyFag 2.0 model, likes a bet. This is only, I think, the fourth or fifth time that we've seen it. Likes the Rams under. So agrees with you, Judah.
I think I'm 4 for 4 here now.
Second hardest strength of schedule. Net rest 2 days, mean spread around -4. So, elevated expectations every week. And if you start to sustain any sort of those injuries, again, we're talking about, as you mentioned in the beginning, Yanni, Stafford in his arm, his elbow,
Point about injuries is actually very important with the Rams, which they've been one of the luckiest teams with regards to injuries over the past 4 or 5 years. A lot of fragility here. It's not just, it's the coaching staff, it's the loss of players, but it's also just, it's things like injuries. There's a lot of, when pricing in the Rams, regression that I think you can actually be pretty confident in.
Anytime a team does win the Super Bowl, there is some element of luck that factors in there. And they kind of got hot at the right time. Things fell into place for them. And it's hard to imagine that they're not going to have a little bit of regression with some of that going into this year. And if it happens with a guy like Stafford or a Jalen Ramsey and Aaron Donald, they don't have the depth.
I don't even think they should have won the Super Bowl. In the Super Bowl.
And they were a dropped interception away from losing in the NFC Championship. They barely squeaked by Tampa Bay when Tampa Bay lost both their offensive
it required a perfect throw from Stafford to cup in stride. Yeah, the Rams were just a sliver better in multiple games that were all absolutely necessary in order for them to actually end up kind of winning the Super Bowl. Although I don't think that's necessarily super unusual. I feel we all know kind of football, game of inches, things like that. Definitely personified by the Rams last year. But again, looking at this 2022 schedule, there was just no respite. Stretches of games where they're going to be playing super tough competition, getting beat up. The Niners, Bucks, Cards, Saints, Chiefs, all in a row. And then kind of get a mini break versus the Seahawks. Then Raiders, Packers, Broncos, Chargers. And that's to start off the season with Bills, Cards, Niners, Cowboys. You can start to see this unravel. And then when you have a more fragile offensive line, that's the perfect recipe, actually, for this to start to unravel. And again, the expectations are still pretty elevated. Minus 235 to make the playoffs. All right, well, we'll take the 10 under. All right, so that wraps up our division preview of the NFC West. Thanks, Judah. Thanks, Yanni, for joining. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll see you next week when we preview the best division in football, the AFC West. That's closing bet.